I've got time, so I will introduce our co-facilitators, Carrie Swanson as the president of USA and Stacy Hosty, the vice president of USA, are going to run the meeting, facilitate the meeting. And from NPR, we have Melanie McCarty and Alex Ashworth and Tim Prestridge. So I'll hand it over to you, Carrie.
All right. Well, thank you all for attending. This is the second meeting. About a week ago, we had a USA affiliates meeting, and it was just with the affiliates talking about the NPR network and what kind of questions are coming up as you think about this and trying to put it together. And so we now have put those questions together. Virginia has shared them with the folks at NPR, just in general terms. And we're so glad that so many folks from NPR are here to join us. You are the folks that probably aren't going to the PRPD, or you're on your way or something, I don't know, but thank you for joining us today. We want to spend as much time as we can with the questions and answers that you might all have, that NPR can help, or maybe some of the other stations that are working on this can help. I know that one of my staff here, Karen and I, have Gemma Hovens here from our staff, who has been somewhat successful in working with our university on the Stripe issue. So I think she's here to chat a little bit too about her perspective and maybe some tips and hints that will help you. So with that, I think we'll just go ahead and turn it over to our folks at NPR. So again, I want to make sure, Tim, Sachi, Melanie, anybody else from NPR? Oh, Alex. Hi, Alex. How are you? Nice to see you again. Anybody else from NPR on?
Sachi's actually traveling out to Colorado today for a meeting with our CDO, Leora, but we also have Josh Hoffman from our member.
Oh, Josh. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So again, if you just go to the next couple of slides there, Virginia,
Sure.
Just to kind of tee it off. Again, the NPR network is about putting together and taking advantage of the power of NPR with stations in relationship, especially on the digital and podcast side, increasing membership, increasing donations and underwriting, and just a general awareness. And so NPR, I'm going to let you kick it off, but I think we want to spend as much time with questions. You can either use the chat to put questions in, or raise your hand, and Stacy and I will kind of keep track. One thing I really want to stress, though, there are a lot of questions, and maybe there's some past history, but we'll have a civil discussion. So please keep your comments appropriate in learning about information.
So Carrie, do you want us to go through these slides first and then go into discussion, or how would you like us to proceed?
I think if there's anything new that we haven't heard yet, we should know. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of questions that.
Yeah, I don't believe there's anything new. We continue to work on various elements of this, but there's been no sort of major decisions or any sort of significant changes since the last time NPR did any presentation. So I'm happy to just move into question and answers. That way we can have more of a conversation over this time and get to as many questions and concerns or thoughts that people may be having.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does anybody want to start off with the first question? I know this is not a shy group. Tim, I'm going to start off with the first question. Can you walk through a little bit more the thinking around the member acquisition piece? When a member comes to NPR, say, and wants to make a donation, and they can't affiliate to a station. What's the process looking like right now for that?
Sure. The actual wireframes and what that will look like are still in design and process, but the overall concept and feeling will be that regardless of how they come into us from whatever digital platform or whatever space they come to us in, from a digital standpoint, they will always be offered the station option. That will never go away. So the way they see their sort of geolocated options, or if they're in a space where there's just one option, that will always be present. What the addition is a separate option for those who may not have an affiliation with their station yet, may not even know of their station, but read NPR content online or just listen to podcasts, or we know there's about 20 million-ish based on our audience insight data from that team who just interact with content digitally on NPR. So they will be offered that option to do the NPR network donation because they want to support the sort of larger efforts that are going on across the network because they don't have that sort of connection to that station yet. But the goal is that those people will ultimately become station members. So immediately those names, and I say immediately, but I don't know the exact time frame, but we're going to get it as immediate as possible. That those names would be shared. The names and information will be shared with the station. As you all know, there's a piece that's still outstanding of what to do in the major market stations. But other than that, those names will be sent to the stations as leads for the station to begin to cultivate those people. And on our side, we will begin to send out a series of communications, the thank yous, the receipts, those sort of things. And the goal is to pull in information from the station or somehow begin to make that connection between the station and this new donor, even though they may not know of that station yet. So our desire is to make sure that from the start, they are beginning to understand that there is a local station in their area who is the representative and have their own separate local content that may be of interest to that particular person or donor. So that's the sort of quick explanation of it.
Right. Okay. So those communication pieces, how will they be coordinated between network and the station? Because like if the station all of a sudden gets the names, like, and we want to go ahead and communicate.
Yep.
But maybe there's a little bit of teeing up that needs to happen. So.
Yeah, once those donors, so if the donor is an NPR network station donor and an NPR network donor and are not currently a member of a station, then NPR will steward them throughout the year because we don't know yet when that person has become a donor or not. And so that's where we would need station input to say, okay, this donor you sent me, they've actually become a member of our station now. Otherwise, for those who we know have matched to a station and we've passed that information along, we would still send a sort of welcome series to them because we're going to need to send them that receipt and the acknowledgement and that sort of thing. But we would be providing to the stations what that schedule would be. So you would know that from the moment they made the donation, in 1 week they were sent this communication. At week 4, they were sent this communication, et cetera, so that the station would know from the moment of that donation what communications had come from NPR during that sort of initial time frame.
Great. Okay. Questions are coming in via chat, and I know that some people have unmuted. So go ahead, Stacy.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question, Tim, on the timing of that NPR stewarding a donor for a year. Is that unless or until they become a member of their local station, or will NPR continue to shepherd that relationship over the course of the year, regardless of their newfound relationship with the member station?
I think the plan is for us to likely do it for the full year. just because that person has made that donation to the NPR network at that point. And so it's just good practice for us to do that stewardship throughout the year to make sure that we can get them to that next renewal period. But the hope is that by that next renewal period, when they go in to do the renewal, they will then choose the station, or the station will have developed a relationship so that when we do the matching again, we will know, okay, that donor has made a gift to their station, and then NPR would step away from that relationship at that point because they've become a station donor.
Okay, so there is a scenario then that you're describing where essentially there's a membership model at play here with NPR to facilitate a renewal in that particular case then.
I mean, we don't really think about it as membership in terms of we're going to go for sustainers or that sort of thing. Like that's not going to be we're not looking for that on the NPR side. What we're looking for is just to keep people in the funnel. And if there is a donor who, for whatever reason, decides that, you know, a station relationship they just don't have, I would rather get that money in for the system. And that's the ideal. The ideal is to get them to the station, but if not to the station, then we still want that donor and that money in the system so that even if they don't do it in 1 year, maybe in year 2 or 3, they become a donor. I don't want to we don't want to step away from a donor just because they haven't made a decision to support a station. We want to keep engaging them until we know they've made that relationship to the station, or if they never do, we want to keep that money coming in to the network so that we can continue to provide things that support the entire network, like safety and security equipment, those sort of things.
If a station recruits one of these members that you send their names and they join after 3 months, you will then quit hustling them and the stations will do the contact and the stewardship.
Yeah, we would probably still likely steward their gift for that first year.
Then you have a membership program, Tim. It's not about sustainers, it's about if you're stewarding and the station is stewarding. I'm questioning why you would do that if they've become a station member, if that's your goal.
We would not renew them in the second year.
Yeah,
we would just steward them, because it is good practice to steward for where the gift was made. So if they've made a gift to NPR network, then they are expecting to hear from the NPR network and know the impact of their gift for that year. But the goal is that they get to the station. So if at the end of the first year, they say, okay, I've made a gift to my station, then NPR backs off, and we're not renewing them for a second year. So in that way, it's not that sort of annual fund program, because we wouldn't renew them in the second year unless they had not made a gift to the station.
Membership. But the problem is, if you steward somebody for a year, it's going to be really difficult to take them from the NPR network and move them to a station. It's going to be difficult anyway, because people don't go from organization A to organization B because we want them to. And so you steward NPR network, NPR, whoever it is, having a membership program, which that is what it is. When you steward somebody for a year, you're going to make it even more difficult for them to move to a member station. And Sasha posted this thing on a draft of the NPR donation user journey on our Prado stuff. And she says 8 weeks. And that was confusing because she said you were going to localize in week 2. And it's like, if you're going to localize to local station in week 2, why not hand it off to the station and let the station do their job? The stations all have wonderful membership organizations. And if it's truly about making members for member stations, then NPR and NPR network need to hand that off to the stations and let the stations do what they can do. Because at that point, they become ours. And if you keep them for a year, it's going to be really difficult, in my opinion, to do that.
Let me go to a couple other questions as Tim thinks about that one. But Heidi, on one note, that is a lot of these folks that are coming may not understand that there is a local station and a network. They think we're one and the same. That's how we present ourselves on the air. So
So in my opinion, that becomes a marketing issue, and that we should be marketing ourselves as NPR wants to invest $1 million, invest $1 million in billboards or signs, or how about on air or in digital that says, join your local station, blah, blah, blah. And instead we're taking them and giving them to a network that in NPR's world is different than NPR, but in actuality it's NPR, whether you call it the NPR network or NPR, you're splitting hairs. Mm-hmm. And if it's truly about member stations, then let the member stations do what they need to do to cultivate that member.
Gemma, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah, I had a question. I know we've been doing the NPR Streamline donation form, and when a donor makes a gift, of course, they've selected KOW. But my question is, at that point, the 3 email series is co-branded with both NPR content and KOW content. So I guess my question is, should a donor that is an NPR lead provided to KOW become a KOW donor, is there a possibility to technically in the period that NPR is calling the stewardship year to provide then co-branded? Because I'm hearing, you know, like we want to keep, if they've made the commitment to come to the station really wants to build that relationship, and it would be confusing to be getting stuff from KOW and from NPR. So I guess I'm asking from a technical perspective, if we said, yep, Susan's now KOW donor, you know, I'm sure the NPR engine there is very sophisticated. Could the rest of the stewardship material be co-branded? And I was just looking at KOW's numbers for the last 2 fiscal years of leads that we've gotten from NPR, because there's a number of places we get leads. Looks like we are converting on average 2.83% of them into donors. So I think we're right to talk about having a mechanism to retain the people who are not going to necessarily want a station affiliation.
Yes, that is absolutely the goal, is that once they are localized and we know sort of what area they are in, that in order to build that relationship, then yes, absolutely, there will be content from the station as well as co-branded from the station, so that they begin to understand what that station is and how that station works with NPR, so that they understand that they are 2 separate entities and that there is a reason for why they need to support the local station. So short answer is yes.
Other comments or questions?
Jim, I asked a question in the chat too about the multi-station market. It looks like it's answered in the chat, but if anybody wants to unmute and follow up on that, it looks like there was a couple of folks on that particular topic.
So the multi-market station to me is really interesting because I'm in one. We are 110 hours of NPR programming a week. They are 30.5. Every single time I go to a website, like, wait, don't tell me, which we air, they don't. And if I do, wait, don't tell me NPR, and I wait and I click the donate button, both stations come up and they're on top every single time. Little frustrating. In the Slack board the other day, somebody posted an example of where she clicked the donate button. She's in North Carolina and geo-targeted Eastern Kentucky. So how does that shake out? And is the time frame still looking at the end of fiscal calendar year? Because I got to tell you, I'm really nervous about NPR trying to roll this out at calendar year end with so many unanswered questions. And I would love to be your cheerleader and tell you this is great and wonderful. And if you get me on your side, I will tell everybody how wonderful this is. But as a station development director, my allegiance is to my station and my donors. And it really irritates me that my hard work is being pushed to another station when they don't even air the programs. And it's not just wait, don't tell me. I went through our entire NPR schedule, and every single one of them, both stations appear and the other station appears on top every single time.
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on the localization piece and how that happens, just because that is an engineering feat in our IT and technical departments, and I work in development, so I don't want to comment on things that I don't fully understand. But
Are
when
they working on that? Do you know?
they continue to work on localization to make it as best as possible. Yes, I mean, it continues to be a focus for that team to always get the best location, geolocation as possible for people. Back to the question about the multi-station markets. It's a difficult question. And if I talk to someone at a small station, how they would prefer those leads be rolled out is very different than how a large station would prefer those leads be rolled out. And so it becomes a very difficult decision to make, just because there are competing priorities and no station is the same. And so, I think that is, if I'm being as transparent and blunt as honest, I think that is the place that NPR is in right now, is trying to decide what is best for the network writ large, and getting as much feedback from stations in forums like this and other forums, to make that decision, because there isn't an easy answer, because a larger station says give it to everybody. Smaller station says let's find a different mechanism, because the larger station gets a lot of names and traffic already. We need those names. And so we continue to think about what we can do in the short term, and then what we can do in the long term, to try and make this more and more effective as we go along.
I wonder if maybe a way to help kind of illustrate that point that you're making, Tim, would be for folks to have a real clear sense of how the revenue generated through these initiatives will benefit the system as a whole. And there might not be as much sort of territorial conflict if everybody's able to sort of see the 30,000 foot perspective of, okay, I see how this affects and benefits my station.
Yeah.
I understand the desired outcomes. I understand the money distribution. I understand, those kind of things may help to solidify some of that.
Yeah. So when we talk about the revenue that comes off of this, as I hope has been made available to everyone in terms of how those decisions get made, that decision will ultimately be made by the board of directors, which, as you all know, is majority member station directors. So they will have the final say on how that money gets spent. There are ultimately three options. So it'll be out of NPR staff's hands in terms of how that money is spent, and will really be up to your fellow representatives on the board for how that money gets spent. There are multiple options that they've discussed. One being things that directly help stations. So any revenue that comes in from that could be put toward dues and a reduction of dues for stations. It could come as direct payments to stations, or if the board decides there is some sort of initiative that could benefit the entire system. Let's say we need to outfit, as I was saying before, if we need to outfit more stations with safety and security equipment, or some other sort of large scale initiative that we need to support stations, then that's where that money would go. So all of that money will be earmarked for decision by the board. NPR staff will have no say on where that money goes. Now, we can make recommendations to the board, but it's ultimately up to the board to decide whether that makes sense or not. Sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I think that's helpful, Tim, and I know that the staff doesn't have that ultimate say, but I think that is the kind of thing that for the NPR network, the more that we can put that out in the forefront is, we are trying to put more money and more members into this system, and for the benefit of all stations in some way. I think, as Stacy said, having that kind of 30,000 foot thought there kind of makes it a little easier for stations to try to, It's tough. The territory thing is tough.
Sure.
Between NPR and the stations, between our local stations and not.
But it shouldn't be between NPR
No.
stations.
Right. It shouldn't be.
NPR is a member station organization. NPR is there to support member stations. And from what I see, that's not how it works now. The general feel that I get is that instead of NPR working for the member stations should be working for NPR. And that's not how NPR was set up. And if NPR's changed that, then they certainly need to redo their bylaws and everything else. And that's a whole nother conversation.
I think too, though, we have to remember that the audience is changing. They are choosing to go straight to digital without the station involved. There's a huge set there that we need to be able to capture, or else we won't have the continuing members.
But that's only in certain states. Like in New Mexico, where I am, we are the #1 station in the Albuquerque, New Mexico market. So my digital is like 1%. Why would I push people to 1% when I'm #1 in my market on air? And the reason we are is because New Mexico doesn't have cell coverage everywhere. New Mexico doesn't have high-speed internet everywhere. I mean, if I drive 2 hours in any direction from my station, I lose cell service on the major interstates that go through New Mexico. So that, I get what you're saying about digital, and that's probably true in urban, east of the Mississippi world and larger cities on the West Coast, but you got a whole bunch of stations in the middle of the US and in the Rocky Mountain region that's not true. And when I look at this, I'm like, okay, in talking to my peers at the PBS side, they've told me from their research at their station that the Passport has lowered the average gift to their station. Well, if you lower the average gift to your station and you're not making that up in volume, you lower the amount of revenue you have going into your CSG. So as NPR Network is talking about, and the board, how they're going to spend this money, if you give money to the stations, are you going to make up not only the amount of revenue that they've lost from a lower average gift, but are you going to make up the revenue that they've lost from a lower CSG? Because what we've done as a system has lowered the revenue coming into that station. I mean, to me, there are so many unanswered questions about this initiative. Yes, maybe it's a great idea. Maybe it's the best thing since sliced bread. But the fact that there are so many unanswered questions really bothers me.
Well, on that very note, I'm not able to see everyone's hands. I'm trying to scroll through to make sure that everyone does get a chance to ask questions while we have a captive audience here. So other folks who want to unmute themselves, I know Carrie and I are also monitoring the chat, and there's some general conversation there, but I think those questions have been addressed, at least to the best of our ability at this moment, about multiple station markets and donor communications and that. Other questions?
There were a lot of comments in our earlier discussion about both Stripe and CDP. Could we talk about why, if you have considered using more than one processor to allow stations greater flexibility?
Sure, I'll toss that question over to Josh. Josh, if you don't mind, Josh is on our member partnership team and works really closely with the Stripe implementation. So Josh, if you don't mind, I'd like to toss that question to you if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure. The short answer is right now, no. We have not considered another payment processor for this initiative. There are so many features and flexibility with Stripe that I understand, obviously, that there are roadblocks to university stations, especially adopting it, especially when it's related to being owned by a state, et cetera. And I know every station is different. I know we have head stations that have successfully navigated that, including KUOW and Gemma on the call. I know there was mention of her possibly speaking to that. So I think that might be helpful. That's not to say that there won't be an option in the future, for stations to participate if they can't adopt Stripe. We are working on that. I do not have a timeline, unfortunately. Likely next year sometime. Again, I wish I could give you a more clear answer on that. But yeah, it likely won't be through a different payment processor. It will be through a situation where we actually distribute the donors and funds to stations somehow. Again, I am not saying that any of that is figured out at all. We are really focusing on the initial implementation and getting this up and running with the stations that we've identified that are going to launch in November. And so that is our focus. Again, not to say that we are letting any of that sit on the wayside. We're working on it all. And hopefully next year we'll have more information to share about that. But right now, Stripe is a requirement to participate in these programs.
Rachel has her hand up. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that, Josh. I'm definitely at a university station where this is going to be tough and not quick at all. So this is kind of a one-on-one question. Forgive me, NPR colleagues, if I'm making you repeat yourself, but we won't be set up with Stripe by the time this launches this fall. Can you give me a real clear understanding of what folks in my area are going to experience? And then down the road of, how we onboard later, if we are able to work out Stripe with our university, or are there going to be certain onboarding points, or is that rolling stations in as they're able to figure it out?
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. As far as the initial launch, and I'm sorry, I think there were two parts to your question. So future onboarding, we do not have the exact dates on that yet. We're expecting the summer of next year is when we will be able to start onboarding more stations to NPR Plus. The Streamline Donation Initiative, though, we are working on onboarding stations in a rolling way whenever they're ready for that. And so that's what I'll say with that is there is some time to work through, adopting Stripe. We can try our best to, answer your university or licensee's issues. And I'm sorry, Rachel, could you repeat the first part of your question? I think in answering the second part, I may have forgotten the first part.
I compounded a couple together there. My question really is just kind of walk me through real lay terms in like when a digital user in my geographic area is getting this, solicitation this fall, what does that look like? Is there any point at which they could just say, give it the station site? Or if we're not set up on Stripe, are we just sort of totally excluded from this solicitation altogether?
Very good question. We are working with our marketing team and to just not make it available or like try our best to hide this from people in your area if you are not launched on NPR Plus. So the hope is that, that's not to say that people won't hear about it, so they may, but our goal is that in all marketing, communication, geo-targeting, that if there's no station set up on NPR Plus, then we are not going to solicit NPR Plus. That's not to say we will not still solicit donations to your station directly. Like that's not going to change. We will still, like if people click donate and they're localized to your station, they're still going to be able to donate. I hope that answers your question. I don't have the details on how we're going to suppress the information. But we're also going to provide ways to respond to your donors that may ask about it and things like that, like as the project rolls out. So as November gets closer, we will have kind of talking points and things you can tell your donors, about the experience and how they can possibly have it in the future.
And I want to be clear and just sort of make sure that everyone understands the distinction between NPR network donation and the podcast bundle. So the podcast bundle or NPR Plus is only available with Stripe. So that's the sort of piece where the implementation requires your station to be on Stripe. As far as the NPR network donation is concerned, you don't need to be on Stripe to get those names. So those names will come to you regardless. And so being on Stripe is not necessarily a requisite for you getting leads and money going to the network as part of the donation. It's only a requirement in order to receive the NPR bundle, which is how individuals sort of go into the system to get that bundle. So those are two separate things that I just want to make sure are very clear. So even with the network donation, your station's still going to appear at donate.npr.org. So that's not going to change at all. And people who, for whatever reason, decide to choose the network, those names will still come to you. So regardless of your Stripe implementation, that side of the house will not be affected. It's only the bundle that has that sort of prerequisite of Stripe. Now, I'll say Stripe makes it easier. Well, I have heard stations say that the Stripe implementation makes it easier for them to get those direct donations when someone chooses your station. But as I said, it's not a requirement for us being able to pass you the leads as part of this network initiative.
But how do you sign up for that network passing the leads thing to the stations?
Well, the idea right now is to use the same mechanism that we already use to send you leads from NPR One. So those would all go into the sort of the same bundle. And we would be able to sort of denote for you, like whether they came through NPR One or whether these are more warm handoffs through that same mechanism. Because what we want to avoid clearly is having multiple options or multiple ways that you have to get information from us about these donors.
Since
And we have to have our database to look at in order to get those leads from NPR network donations or not?
So you would not need, you would need to put your information in the third-party database in order for us to match and tell you, so that we would know that we need to not, really push and steward that donor for additional years, so that you would tell us, yes, that's my donor, because otherwise we're never going to know whether that is your donor or not. Now, in order to access the leads that we send you, that's not a requirement. So if you decide not to go into that third party system, we're still going to send you the names. Those two things are separate from each other.
So I think that's one of the things that's confusing for people is how do we, I guess, initiate the station wanting to be part of that so that we can send our database to this third party CDP, WGBH, versus not doing that. Is there an agreement between NPR and the station, or how does that happen?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question. You're asking, how does the station begin to input their information into the third-party database in order for us to do that matching?
Right, because I would assume there has to be an agreement between NPR, the third party, and the station for legal reasons.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, those legal documents and contracts are not confirmed yet. They are in works. So I can't sort of say definitively at this date, but they are a priority in our legal department right now. The hope is that no, there wouldn't have to be an agreement between NPR and the station, that NPR would contract with the vendor, this third party, and then the relationship of your data and what you own becomes a contract between you and that station. So there would not need to be any sort of contract between NPR and the station per se, as long as the contracts between the two entities are legally sound enough to preserve data privacy.
Even though NPR is paying for that.
Even though NPR is paying for what?
Well, NPR is paying the third-party vendor, right? The stations don't have to pay. So if NPR is paying for the service, that doesn't interfere with the legality of the station being involved with this third party without it going through NPR?
No, because your relationship is with the vendor ultimately, and our relationship is with the vendor as well. It's two separate relationships.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I wanted to, since we're talking about Stripe really quick, Gemma from our KOW team is on, and she might be able to give a little bit of hints on how we were able to get, really how she was able to get the university convinced Stripe is okay. Gemma, do you have any comments on that you can share?
Oh, sure. I'll be really brief, but if anyone has specific questions, I'm happy to take them. I can put my email in the chat too. The University of Washington kind of had, they think of it in 3 buckets. One is, the security of the platform, and Stripe is a level 1 service provider. So it's the highest level of security, privacy of the donor information that's stored on Stripe. So we had our privacy issue, and then cost. So how we approached it was, since we say, well, this is clearly a safe system, it meets the privacy concerns for storing donor information. It was really the cost of Stripe, which is higher than the university's current processor. So we just had to build a business case. Why did KOW, need this particular mechanism to acquire these donors? So that's how we approached it, is really to make the case of that, how many consumers are on the NPR network, how many consumers are in Seattle that might not have a relationship to the station, and then kind of build. So it is a donor acquisition argument, because we found, because of how well Stripe is set up, like they can't really it's not safe, or the donor information isn't secure. So it really, for the university, seemed to come around cost. And once you made that argument, it seemed that opened the door for us.
I see that Jeff has his hand up too. I'm not sure if that's in relation to what Gemma is saying.
You were on there for a minute.
Yeah, I have a question to follow up with Tim, if I could.
Well, I just saw your name pop up with the black
Can
screen.
everyone mute again too? We've got a lot of background noise other than Jeff. Everyone mute.
Okay.
Jeff, happy to answer.
Hey, Tim, one of the things that I'm getting confused on, and maybe it's because I'm kind of new to this and I'm picking up bits and pieces in different places, but there seems to be multiple paths into the system. There's the NPR Plus bundle path, and a certain set of criteria for that one. There's kind of what we have today, which is when donors go on and pick a station out of the digital button that we have today, and there's a path in that way. It might be helpful for me to understand which process is going to go where, if you kind of did a flow chart for each one of those and said, okay, the Stripe people who are participating, their path is going to look like this. The people who are not yet participating in the NPR podcast bundle are going to look like this. And that would help, I think, in terms of trying to localize how we're going to interact, not only with the donor, but with NPR at the same time. So I think there's multiple paths here. There's things you're trying to get done. Digital is where we're going to have to get to. I think we're all kind of understand that, but sometimes it gets confusing to me which one's going to go where. And like many of the people on the call, we're also a multi-network environment where we have probably 4 university stations that overlap at different places in the state. So it's not going to be easy, and we're all small, so that's not going to be easy either. But I think the element of a flow chart about this package looks like this, and this package looks like that would be helpful.
That's great feedback, Jeff. And I love Alabama, as that's my home state. So I'm happy to take that back to the team and see if we can provide a little more visual element that would sort of, exactly as you say, walk everyone through sort of, okay, donor comes into X area, here's what happens, and that's their flow. If they decide to go into the NPR Plus bundle, this is what their flow looks like. And I think that should be relatively easy to do, because I know we have that on the network side in terms of the donation side, and I suspect the NPR Plus bundle has that too. It's just a matter of sort of combining those, but that's great, and I can certainly take this back to the team and see if we can get that to send around to people.
I mean, what stimulated my thought was I did see the document with the flow chart that you've already put out, and I'm assuming that's the typical digital strategy. Although I have some concerns about nurturing the client and all those kinds of things. I think that needs to be clarified a lot, because when that handoff happens, when they go from being an NPR donor over to a station donor, that has to be really crystal clear not only to NPR and the station, but to the donor, because it's the donor that we're trying to attract and keep. And if they get confused, we're going to lose them.
Yeah, it's a great point.
That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Other questions or topics that we haven't covered yet? We've got about a little over 10 minutes
Yes.
left.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question here. By the way, thank you for doing the meeting. When the decision is made on the allocation of funds for the stations should insist that that discussion and policy setting on how the funds are allocated needs to occur in an open public meeting, not in some subcommittee, which comes out to the full board and receives a unanimous consent recommendation. Thank you very much.
How would the membership voice that, Michael?
I'm traveling and you keep dropping out, so I apologize. So I missed part of that.
I was asking what would be the sort of appropriate mechanism for ensuring that that conversation takes place in a platform like you're suggesting?
Well, if we all agree to this, then we need to request that the board hold all the discussion on the allocation of funds, and what the policy is, and that take place in an open public meeting.
It's also my understanding, and NPR folks, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is still a plan to create some sort of an outside advisory group made up of majority of stations that are not necessarily on the board that will help inform that.
Not good enough. The policy will be made by the board, and that board decision needs to take place in an open meeting. We talk about transparency all the time. We require that of government. We sure can ask that of NPR. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. That might be a good topic also for the AREPS channel.
Yes.
You know, to be able to help facilitate that dialogue taking place in an accessible platform, as Michael's suggesting.
Thank you very much.
So one of
go ahead.
my concerns is that NPR is going to push this out for year end. I'm going to circle back around to that. It is now, for all intents and purposes, September. And I don't know about other stations, but my year end stuff is already in motion. So I'm very concerned that NPR is going to push, the NPR network is going to push this out without dotting the I's and crossing all the T's. And we're going to have major confusion with donors at a time of year when 35% of donations to nonprofits come in. And I know NPR wants to do this. I get it, but I'm really concerned about the lack of finalization on stages at this point. And I don't want all of a sudden the middle of November say, yep, we're doing this. And this is how it's going to work. And maybe I'm the only one that feels that way. But I just hope that there's, I guess, more clarification and more transparency between now and when they push the button to make it real.
Tim, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I take that feedback, and you know, from my seat, I hope I am able to be as transparent anytime anybody asks me questions, if I know the answer clearly. And I think the only thing I can sort of say to that, Heidi, is that there's no doubt this is a very large, complex change to our system. It's one that I think at least the people who sat on the advisory board and the actual Inc. board all felt that this was the best decision for the network moving forward, that we needed to do this now because the switch to digital is upon us, and every moment that we wait we are losing traction with audiences across the country who are switching to other digital platforms, and that we needed to move as quickly as possible. And I think with any sort of significant change like this, there are always going to be X factors out there that we are not going to be able to have the answers to. There's no way in something this large, in turning a ship to a different way, that there aren't going to be some unanswered questions. And I think we are hoping that everyone will enter this with us in a spirit of, we're going to have to try some things and we're going to get some things wrong. And that's going to need to be okay, because there's no way we're going to get to the best solution the first time. It just isn't possible. And so we are building in review periods after this to say, all right, is this working? What's not working? Are the stations being harmed by this more than they're being hurt? All right, then we need to rethink some of this. And those are requirements that the board has set forth to say, we're going to review what's going on quarterly. We have to provide data and reports to the board quarterly so that we can begin to track and say, all right, here's what is happening that's good. Here's what needs to be fixed. And I think that's the sort of spirit in which we are entering this, is that we know there are going to be hiccups and challenges, but we have to start somewhere.
But I think that I didn't attend PMDMC, but talking to my peers that were there, the general census was that their feeling walking away from PMDMC regarding the NPR network, and in discussions, I guess, with people from NPR and other people there, was just trust us, we got this. And that's not good for stations to feel that way. And you're right. I mean, there needs to be mutual trust here. I've had several conversations with people at NPR, sent several emails to NPR, haven't received answers to some of those emails still. I get that I'm very boisterous about this because I'm very invested in what I do here. I am the development director of my station. It is my responsibility to take care of my donors, not NPR's, mine and my station. And when my GM comes to me and says, what do you think? I'm going to be honest about it. And right now I feel like NPR saying, I trust us, it'll be fine. And that's not a good feeling from where I sit. And I apologize if that's not the true, I don't think that's the true spirit of what's happening, but unfortunately, I think that's the consequences of the actions of not answering emails, not having answers to questions, still questioning how this is all going to roll out, what's going to happen. And so I think in the system, from talking to my peers, there is a big lack of trust in the system right now.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that sentiment. I will agree that I don't believe that is the sentiment from NPR. It is certainly not the sentiment of my peers that we are saying, just trust us. We are saying this is a big, complicated thing, and we're all in this together, and we need to learn from each other, and we need to have people keep pointing out things that aren't working so that we can address them. But that ultimately there has to be a shift and a change forward. And that we need to do that together. And no, NPR doesn't have all the answers. That's why we continue to solicit feedback from the stations, because you know your work as best as anybody. And Heidi, I know you've sent me emails which I've responded to. And so if I can be a resource for the people on this call as your representative from the development department, please email me and I will do everything in my power to get you an answer. And if there isn't an answer to your question yet, I'll be upfront about that and why there isn't an answer. So, I apologize that maybe you haven't gotten answers in other places.
That's
but
okay.
I will continue to be a resource for anyone on this call that has, questions and concerns moving forward.
Well, and Tim, you have been really good about answering questions, but I think one of the frustrations is that there are questions and questions and questions, and the answers aren't there right. And the time frame of December is like 3 months away. And so, I would hope that NPR, if they need to, would maybe take a step back and realize maybe December's an unrealistic goal for rolling this out. Because Getting it wrong in 1 or 2 areas is fine. Getting it wrong in 9 out of 10, not so good, and not good for anybody in the system. I mean, I get that it's not going to be perfect, and I understand that, but we need to make sure it's as good as we can possibly make it before it gets rolled out, so that we don't harm the system more than help it.
Stacy, you had your mic
Well,
open.
I just wanted to kind of flag our time here with just, coming to the top of the hour, and make sure that if there's any other questions, we got to them by raising your hand. But the other thing is that maybe, Tim, you could speak to the next sort of horizon timeline here for when some of those decisions will be made, when we'll expect to see the composition of an advisory group outside of the board. And then if there's an opportunity for stations to have some input into the ideas of where the funds are distributed and the kinds of things, clip services, encore broadcast, those kinds of things that stations may have some thoughts on funding to say, hey, it'd be great if we could, incorporate these.
Yeah, so I can't really speak to the board question because that's something, again, I'm on the development team. So those are questions that your GMs would need to take to, or whoever on your teams would need to take straight to the board, to your colleagues that, represent stations on the board.
You're saying for the advisory council, the group of stations, that's a board level decision? Okay.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Got it.
In terms of sort of horizons and next steps, we continue to work on the daily toward this. And I know we are getting closer and closer to some of those decisions that, I understand the sense from everyone that there's a little bit of uneasiness here, knowing that, there isn't a solid answer in the system yet for X question. So I do believe that by sort of early October, sort of mid-November was when we have to meet with the board again and give them an update. So that will be a bit of a decision point, I believe, where the board will, be able to say, you need to delay this, whatever. So then again, coming out of what comes out of that board meeting in September, we'll go from there and see, what those decisions are and get those out to the system as quickly as possible. Yeah. Did I answer all your questions, Stacy? I'm sorry. I think there may have been a third one that I missed.
No, I think the key concept there of kind of what the next checkpoints are is probably helpful to everybody. And then Carrie comments in the chat too that still a little unclear about what the stations need to provide if we aren't able to incorporate NPR Plus, and there is no NPR rep for some appointed stations. Who do those folks work with?
Sure. So I would say for all stations, if there are development related questions or Stripe NPR Plus questions, there are two places that you can get to people. So one is member partnership is always a great place to start. On nprstations.org, there's actually a map where you can click on your state and station, and it will tell you who your member partnership rep at NPR is so that you can get in touch with them. Also, I know if you just reach out to Gemma or Cy Sykes, they will get you to the right place if you don't already know who that is. And then on my team on the development side, myself, Melanie, who's on this call, and Sachi Kobayashi, who just came to us from OPB, our team is designed to be in partnership with member stations and to help member stations and answer questions from member stations. So, I'll make sure that Virginia and, Carrie and you, Stacy, have the three of our contact information so that if you want to share it with this group, please do. And if there are further questions or things that didn't get addressed today that are still sort of weighing on you, please do reach out to us and we will do the best we can to get answers for you.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for attending. I know that our time is quickly ending, but I don't think this is the end of these conversations. In fact, I'll chat with the USA folks, Virginia and Stacy, and we may be able to have a few more updated conversations like this as we move along, because I think it's really key for the cohorts of university stations that are, have just like a little different thing that we have to all work through on this. So just really appreciate the great questions, the great discussion, and we have this recorded. And Virginia, I guess you've got the last word.
Okay, well, I'll get the recording up on the website within a few days. And if you have additional questions and we want another meeting with NPR, perhaps, Tim, when you get your materials and some dates for the rollout, perhaps we could have a Zoom meeting where you could present what that's going to look like and what, what's the date that files have to be to you for matching with membership and that sort of thing. And again, thanks everybody for coming, and let us know your additional thoughts.